You are listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. Make sure to subscribe to never miss any Pursuit of Manliness content and join our Pursuit of Manliness community at facebook.com/groups/Pursuit of Manliness. All right, man, at this time, I want to welcome Ted Schuster to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. Ted, thanks for taking time today and being on the show.
Hey, it's an honor, brother. Thank you so much for having me today. Totally unexpected.
Man, we have gotten to connect, I'll say first and foremost through a good man, Nick Bonfiglio, but now that you and I have connected, I love your story. I love what you do. I love your heart for Jesus. And would you get us started, man? Lead off with, this is who I am. This is what fires me up. Anything else you think's, would fit well to what we're talking about today?
Yeah. Hey, so I'll give you the quick version and then you can just start digging with questions. That'll probably work out best. Christian guy, been a Christian since I was 4. I'm going to give you the super quick version on this. Strayed away from Christ, started doing my own thing when I was, as I grew older. Lord led me into the military. I ended up doing 20 years of service there. I was 8 years as a ground pounder in the infantry. And then I switched over 12 in aviation. And the Lord drew me closer and closer to him throughout some of those deployments. Got out of the military. During that time, I'll say real quick, I struggled with alcohol and pornography. Those were two of my main addictions. Only through the grace of Christ and his love has he been able to pull me out of that and draw me to full attention and focus on him. And now he's got me still doing what I love in my passion, aviation, flying EMS helicopters. I fly for Air Care 1 in Iowa City on the university rooftop there. There you go. There's my 2-minute, testimony.
Well, sorry, I got a text. I know that you are humbled in that because I can look right over your shoulder right now. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you could see the same thing. There's a helicopter and the word on the street is that you fly those or have flown those. So can you tell us some background on that?
Yeah. Well, key thing is I'm really trying to guide every bit of my story to Christ on this. I like the life that the Lord has given me. It's been a tough road, but when I talk to people about it, especially other Christian men, I always try and just, hey, here's what I did, and here's the decisions that I think that I made. This is what Christ did through me, and that's one of those things. To begin with, I've always had a passion for aviation. I know you got listeners right now, and they're like, "Flying's stupid." That's my thing. I love flying. I love everything about aviation. You talk with other pilots and they'll be like, yeah, I do this, I do that. And I'm one of those guys that's like, hey man, what do you fly? Kites? That's awesome. Teach me something. So I do. I love aviation. And the thing behind that is that God's put that in me. He created me with that. And so he's enabled me to develop that passion and go that route in my life to be able to fly and help others. So as early as I can remember, I've got a picture of my father holding me outside of O'Hare Airport. And I've got, I'm just pointing up at the sky. I'm pointing at the planes flying over. Dad he was a private pilot and he spent a little bit of time in the Air Force. And he just developed, he loved flying and I latched onto that as well. And that turned into me going into the military and picking up flight school. I went through flight school in 2005 down in Fort Rucker, Alabama, 2005, 2006. And I ended up flying for 12 years then as a gun pilot. You can see that Apache behind me there. Super huge job. I loved that time in my life. I ended up being an instructor down there for a period of time in between being at units and going on deployments. And then as the Lord transitioned me out of that job and flying over the tops of the finest ground guys on the face of the planet, I was like, what's next? Well, I want to keep on flying. And I knew immediately before I got out, hey, it's time to time to continue on in what the Lord's given me and help the community. It's still, go be a first responder and help out those that are still in need.
And the timing was, when we talked the other day, you were actually getting called on one of those to see if you could respond in some way. And it's just cool how God does that. God's given everybody different gifts, abilities. That's what makes up the body of Christ. If everybody flew a helicopter, it wouldn't make sense. And so not everyone has to do something different, but man, when we all do them to the best of our ability to the glory of God, the kingdom of heaven advances in radical ways. And one of the things I loved about you, and we talked briefly about it, the other day, was you're a part of a program or a ministry that, at your church, and it's for, men with addiction and things. Would you just lead us off with that and just kind of talk about what that is and, how you got connected to that?
Yeah. So a little bit on my backstory. At a real young age, I felt the temptation of lust. 8, 10 years old, really, you're over at a buddy's house, and I was born in 1977. I'm 42 for those of you that are awesome at math like I am. And about 1987, when I was 10, I think that's when I was introduced to my first porn mag. And it had a grip. It had a real grip. And thankfully, we didn't have the internet back then, but that just drew my pull when I was watching TV to, even on commercials, just start spinning things in my head to lust after women. I won't go into that just yet. The addiction thing, military wise, it's all over. It's rampant, especially in the military. Military is combat arms. I'm with, being in the infantry was like being in a fraternity of dudes. You're in a college dorm and it's all guys, no girls. So, political correctness is out the window. Nobody cares. Anything goes type of environment. And with that, the porn mags are flying all over. One of the tricks for room inspections when first sergeant would walk through, or your platoon sergeant would walk through, is, hey, throw some porn mags out on the coffee table. It'll divert their attention to whatever they might try and gig you on an inspection. And that's just the kind of environment that I lived in there. And then the Army is work hard, play hard. Porn might not be your thing. Lust might not be what triggers you. Alcohol is just another avenue, the enemy uses. And that's how it was. It was work hard, play hard. And so I drank a lot. And fast forward now into getting to the heart of your question there, just quick background on that. I knew that as I was getting out of the military in 2017, that I had a heart for Christ, but I also had this heart for an idol, that idol of alcohol and that idol of pornography. And I was still struggling with it at that time. And I knew that getting out, I was going to go into a transition period. And I really did not want to. I retired out of El Paso, Fort Bliss in Texas. I wanted to leave that behind me, so to speak. And I knew it wasn't going to be just as easy as pick up and move another state and poof, your problems are gone. That's not how it works. I knew that I had to develop a heart for God's word. And so that was my prayer. It was, Lord, develop in me this insatiable appetite for your word. And when I go to Iowa, help me find the men that I need to be paired up with, because I understand if you're trying to do life on your own, man, you're in a world of hurt. You need to find other godly men to step alongside and help grab you, because you're going to fall. People will listen to my story and they'll be like, man, that is so awesome. You're so tough. I'm like, no, I am super weak. And I wish I could put pictures up of the men and just show you, here's the guy that grabbed me during this time of my life. But when you're moving states and you come to a new place and you don't know anybody and you're trying to get involved in a church, your sole reliance is on Christ. Lord, show me these dudes. And so I went and I was looking. And that ended up with me meeting a guy at at the front door of probably the fourth church that I had gone to while I was here, just going and praying about where I should go, Matt Teedy. And Matt came up to me. I was in line waiting behind somebody to sign in and say, hey, I'm new here and whatever. And this guy sees me and he's like, hey, dude, I see you're new and showing up. Can I help you out? And I said, oh, well, this is odd. Usually people don't do that. And I was like, okay, hey, yeah, this is who I am. I just moved here and I'm looking for a group of dudes, particularly my age or around, give or take a few years, that love the Lord. And he's like, no kidding. I'm starting this thing at the Skillet in Mount Vernon, Iowa on Friday mornings at 6. You want to join? And that was it. That was my in for, okay, now I got a group of dudes that's relatively my age. And then that transitioned into, hey, we've got these connection group things at church. Matt he is an elder at our church. And he introduced me to one of our pastors. I wanted to go through some counseling with my wife, and he introduced me to one of the pastors. And it turns out then I ended up in one of my pastor's connection groups. And from there, I ended up in this thing called Steps that we just started. That was the long version of getting around to your question. So Steps is a take that Matt Chandler and Michael Snetzer from the Village Church in Dallas, the Flower Mound Church down there, if you're familiar with Village Church, they put this thing together as an outreach to recovery ministry type of stuff. And that's kind of how it gets played out is, hey, this is a recovery ministry thing. I don't want to paint that picture for it. If you ever come across this Steps program, this is a program where you can look at your church and say, hey, how many people have sin in your life? And every hand goes up. And you're like, this program is for you. And so this program is kind of like the Alcoholics Anonymous step program that they have. But this is taking the gospel and looking at it with a gospel lens and redeeming it that way, redeeming these steps. And so your first 4 weeks, it really paints a good picture of the gospel and what Christ did at his time on this earth and how he approached sin and how he approached people and how he worked in their lives to develop a stronger relationship with them. And then weeks 5 through 8 is self-assessment, and it gets into tough things. It is not a laundry list of sins that are laid out. It'll go into anger, and it'll go into anxiety, and it'll go into physical abuse. And with the particular way that this is laid out, you will see and start connecting dots. It asks questions, and it asks them in a format that you can go along with a mentor, and you can get outside perspective from your mentor looking into your life, and with God pouring into your life, and you guys both approaching this in prayer, you start writing things down and you start connecting dots, and you're like, oh, well, I suffered from anxiety. Well, that's not, or fear. Well, fear isn't ultimately the sin. What's the underlying cause? And you start to look back and you get to the root of the sin. And so I'm not a guy that is resentful. I do not hold grudges against people. You know, I'll be mad just like anybody else a couple of days after the fact, and then it's gone and I forget about it. And I was just raised like that. My parents raised me, hey, forgive and forget. If they ask for forgiveness, that's it. It's a done deal. And through this program, I've been married to my wife since 2004. I realized I've got resentment in my heart for my wife for things that I didn't realize that I had. And so my time throughout the prayer and the program was, Lord, reveal to me what it is in my life that I'm sinning against you, and I have no idea that I'm sinning against you. Because you can talk to somebody, you can say, hey, dude, what do you struggle with? And like I did at the beginning of the conversation, porn and alcohol were my two. Those are no longer my struggles. Now my struggles are elsewhere, but it's always an ongoing process throughout life, right? You've always got things that you're going to struggle with until we finally meet Christ and, you know, and we're in heaven with him and there's no more sin. So through this process, I'm like, well, I don't know that I'm sinning in these areas. And that's what he revealed to me on that first time through is, hey, you resent your wife for this. And so I had to go to my buddies, go to my other Christian men and say, dude, I got to tell my wife that I resent her for such and such, right? And they said, okay, what are you going to say? And I said, well, I want to say this. And they both looked at me and they were like, do not say that, you know? And so like, okay, I need to approach this. They said, you can say that, but if you say it like you just told us, you're immediately going to put her on the defensive and you'll never get your message across to her. So I had to pray about it, and I prayed for it for over a month. And at the particular time, it was summertime, and I was going through this program, and I was like, how am I going to say this? And I would pray about it daily. Lord, how do I convey this to my wife without crushing her soul, without just turning her off? Because it's not anything that wasn't unmanageable in a relationship. And I told her a month out, I said, look, there's something that I need to tell you that is an issue that I have. And don't worry, anytime you come across it's like, I was cheating on you. No, it wasn't infidelity. It's not anything like that. This is sin in my life, and this is my problem. And I have to figure out how to get this across to you without crushing your soul, without, making you feel belittled or hurt. And so I was praying about it. And again, I told you for probably a month, and I was out on my front porch going through my daily program, because this is daily homework assignments that you got. 15 minutes or so is how the program's laid out. And I'm doing it, and I stop, and I'm just praying, Lord, how do I talk to my wife about this? And Jamie walks out. She walks out the front door, and she's like, hey, you got something you want to tell me about? And I was like, well, there we go. There's God at work right there. Right in the middle of the prayer, she walks out the door. This is the time. So I laid it out to her there. And on any other day, at any other moment in time, she would have walked away in tears. And this particular moment, she was like, hey, thanks for being honest with me. I'll let you get back to what you're doing. I appreciate you telling me. And she walked back in the house. And I was like, unbelievable. So the Lord really works through this program in areas like that, things that are super, super tough. Everybody's got things in their closet. Everybody's got those things that they don't allow to come to the light. And this program Steps is all about dragging that out of you. It's all about allowing Christ to work on some of the darkest and deepest secrets that you have, and get those things out into the light and expose them so that the enemy can no longer use that against you. And so that's kind of the program in a nutshell. I've gone through the program now. That was me going through it as a beta course. The church came and said, hey, we're looking at going this route. Well, you have to build up the leaders before you give it to everybody else. And so some guys had said, hey, we'd like to use you as a mentor in this. Is this something you'd be interested in? And so it was a small group of us, like 7 or 8 men and women that did this. And then from there, we allowed it to come up to the rest of the church, and we built up like 30 people. And out of that 30 people, I think we pulled maybe half, maybe 15, maybe 18 mentors out of that, that people that the church thought were ready to go and mentor. And then this past time we opened it up, and going through it now, I've got a mentee. We're just about to finish up. Where I think we're on week 11 of 13 right now. And so each time that I've gone through this course, like the first time the Lord revealed resentment to me, the second time he revealed that gluttony was an issue. And gluttony is not a sin that most people think about. And I was like, I mean, if you look at me, I don't take up the whole screen, right? So you're like, that dude doesn't have an issue with gluttony. Yeah, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond in excess. Hey, if you're watching now, this time that the whole COVID-19 thing is going on, how about gluttony with that? People are just hoarding everything. And I look at that in my life and I'm like, do I really need all that? Do I need this much when I go grab a big gulp at 7-Eleven or whatever, right? And do I need this much chocolate? Do I need half of a pizza, or do I only need 2 pieces of pizza type of thing? And so the Lord was really looking at overall immaterial things and food that way. But I've got 13 weeks to go through this. And as he lays out, hey, gluttony, what else am I devoting to much? Social media, whatever it might be, TV, I don't know, different hobbies. How much of these hobbies are taking up my time where I could be focusing elsewhere and pouring into other people's lives, spending that time with my kids, spending that time with my wife, spending that time with dudes at church, instead of clicking on YouTube and going to the Pursuit of Manliness. Hey, I can call my mentee at Steps and say, hey, dude, you need to get on Pursuit of Manliness and watch this with me, and watch it together type of thing.
There's so much there. There's so much good there. First and foremost, I think you're not talking about, changing, behaviors. You're talking about living and looking at your life through the lens of a biblical worldview. Okay, what does the Bible say about this? I've not gone through Steps, but I've shared, I think it was on a podcast, but I've shared with some guys, in our discipleship group that, there were some sins that I was just continually repenting of. And I'm like, I'm sick of repenting of these sins. So I just asked God, like, what's the deal? Why can't we overcome this? And the root of it, as you talk about, it's not the surface level. It was like, it was coveting. I never thought of coveting was not on my radar at all, And so as you do that, you get into that, but the power is allowing God to transform you, but you staying connected to other good men who will keep you on that straight and narrow. That those guys probably told you, if you talk to your wife like that, you'll be sleeping in the garage, where you are far more delicate with how you spoke to your wife than those guys. And I think about Mark 14, where Jesus brought, Peter, James, and John into the Garden of Gethsemane. That was the greatest fight of his life. That what happened in the garden set the course for, he's going to the cross right after that. Those guys weren't a lot of help, but just the fact that you have men in your corner allows you to get back in that ring each day and fight. And for you, it kept you faithful to, I need to have this conversation with my bride. And then that opens up a whole new level of intimacy, not just sexual, we're talking relational and spiritual and emotional. And I mean, that, and Satan will use whatever he can to cause that divide, and probably speak into your ear and say, you don't need to do this. You don't need to have this conversation.
Yeah. You mentioned the Garden of Gethsemane, and I look at that and I'm like, I would say, look at these pathetic losers. They chose sleep, but we have the backstory on what was going on. It's really an important picture, though, to paint with men is you don't always know the struggle that your buddy is going through. You don't realize the level of intensity of the warfare that's going on in your buddy's life, and you need to be there for him. And so now that you can look at the backstory on the whole Garden of Gethsemane and what happened in the moments after that, I sit there and I'd be like, man, Peter and James and John, losers, how are you sleeping on them on that? And now, those are the guys that I follow. Those are the guys that I listen to, what they've written down for guidance in Christ and how to follow them. And I'm like, they were just having a moment of cloudiness. There's no clarity into what was going on. And
in fairness, they just had a great meal. It'd be like us having a Thanksgiving meal.
Right.
They just saw Judas take off. They don't know what's going on there. I'm sure they're like, what a jackwagon. Where's this guy going? When I knew he was shady, I knew that dude wasn't with us. Remember that one time when he, and so they go to this garden, it's dark, and you're right. You never know what somebody's going through. And it'd be easy to beat yourself up and go, man, I wish I was more attentive. You just don't know. And sometimes you got your own stuff. That's why it talks about that each man has to carry his own load, but we carry each other's burdens. I can help you.
Let's touch on that. For the guys that are listening right now, that applies to you as well as a person, because sometimes you're like, nobody knows. And it's because you're not telling anybody. Sometimes you got to take ownership and just be like, listen, this is what's going on. I'm trying to express it by the look on my face. I'm trying to express it through the tone of my voice, and nobody seems to care. But you got to let out. You got to find that one dude or that one lady that's gonna listen. Somebody in your life will listen, and you got to go and you got to say, this is what's going on in my life, and I need help. And if you can't help me, point me in the direction of somebody that can.
Well, and that's I think of a guy that we have in Tribe. I won't say his name because they're listening and they'll probably know who he is. But he's an intense brother, and he lives out of state. And we have a good bond. We've had a good bond. He is not going to let you slack at all. He will call you out and doesn't hesitate on that. And I was just having, I was thinking months ago, having a day where things at church were not going well. Things, Tribe wasn't going. I was just frustrated, and I knew I could call him, and I knew he would not cut me any slack. He would listen to me, but he's not going to tell me, yeah, you're right, they're all messed up, you're the right. No, he's gonna hold your feet to the fire. And you have to decide in your life, what do you really want? Do you want people who are going to tell you just what you want to hear, or do you want someone who's saying, I'm for you and I'm with you and I'll go the distance with you? But in turn, you're going to be there for me at some point too. And he actually said at the end of the call, like, now I know, like that was a turning point for us. He's like, now I know I can reach out to you and we can do this. And it was a safe play for me because he lives out of state and doesn't, there was nothing moral going on, just frustrating, and so you got to have men that'll hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah, go find them. Go ask at church. If you don't have friends like that, just go to church and say, hey, who will tell me what I need to hear and not what I want to hear? And somebody at church will be like, that guy right over there, his name's whatever.
Well,
it's that simple.
You shared a story. We have a shared friend here, Nick Bonifazi, who's one of the nicest men I ever met, but I'm still convinced he'd rip your face off if you mess with him. But you had a unique way of connecting with this guy in church. And man, I wouldn't plan on doing this, but could we share that story? Because there are guys that will go to church and go, I ain't got any friends, I don't know anybody. But they go in, they plop down every week. They never turn to the left or right. They never make any connections. They check their kid in. They do the same route every week, and they go, well, I don't have any friends there. And you just jumped out of the airplane literally and went, hey, this is who I am. Would you share that? I love it.
Yeah. So again, with Matt Teedy, the guy that I first met at church and got involved with in Friday men's Bible studies. And he said, hey, man, he listened to my story and some of the military stuff. And he's like, I know this guy, Nick Bonifazi, and he was military too. And now he works for, who does he work for? FBI or ICE, Customs.
Intimidating. That's what it is.
Yeah. No, he's a marshal. He's a U.S. Marshal.
Yeah.
And so, that's the first time I'd heard Nick's name. And then my connection group leader, one of my pastors, he's like, oh man, you need to meet Nick Bonifazi. And so he told me a little bit about him. He's a U.S. Marshal. He's a gun guy. He was a former Army dude. You guys kind of got the same parallels in the route that the Lord took you. And so I heard it again. And then I'm working at church with a guy on just a project, putting up like shelves or a coat rack or something. And he's like, oh, my buddy, Nick Bonifazi, you got to meet him. And so I'd probably heard Nick's name 5 or 6 times just in conversations around church and guys that knew him and were friends with him. And I end up going to church one day and I sit down next to a far left side. And I sit down next to this guy and he's with his family. And I just feel led while I'm sitting there. Hey, this looks like a solid dude. Introduce yourself to him. Don't let him get up and walk out at the end of the service. And so I write a note on my phone, and I was like, hey, dude, I'd love to talk to you at the end of service if you got some time, something to that measure. And I show it to him while the pastor's speaking. And he just looks over at me, gives me thumbs up. Yeah, sure. Sermon ends, and I said, hey, I'm Ted, and this is who I am. And he said, hey, I'm Nick Bonifazi. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've heard so much. And turns out he's like, I've heard about you too. And it's amazing because, you're in the search for other warriors in your life and guys that God is working in, and they're really solid guys. And God's not going to put you together with those guys until he feels that time's necessary. And so Nick and I exchanged numbers and we tried to get together. And I think it was probably 10 months before we ever got together for lunch. I would text him and it would be once a month or once every 2 months. Hey, I'm still thinking about you. I can't. And really it was when he could, I was at work. And when I could, he was at work type of thing. We finally got to sit down over coffee and we had an amazing conversation. And it's one of those conversations where you don't know the guy. You've been trying to get in touch with him forever. And before that, you've been hearing about the guy through so many other people. And so when you finally sit down with them, it already feels like your friend sitting across the table type of situation. So it's pretty interesting how the Lord works in his timing and brings people together that way to glorify him in certain things.
Yeah, I love that statement, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't fully recall it. But essentially, God is not going to bring you to another warrior, if you will, until you're ready for that. I think there's two sides of that. One, if you don't have the best intentions, or if God knows that you're going to drain the resources of that guy, if Nick's a solid man, he's trying to be, and he is, if he's trying to be a good husband, father, or whatever, and God knows your motives and God knows your heart, and went like, no, that's not going to be good for him at all. There will be God can cause all kinds of divide there, but I also think, like David, when he had these guys come to him, they were a mess. They had no money. They were emotionally, a wreck. They had no friends, and David turned them into warriors. So I think it's a both and. Like, we need to seek out like-minded men who will make, we say all the time, building better men together, but at the same time, you and I have a direct responsibility to pour into other guys and try to kindle that fire inside them and say, hey, you're created for so much more. And the fact that you're part of a ministry like this, that can, you start out with the word of God and say, do you got sin in your life? Well, if you can't admit you don't have sin, that's a starting point. So if you can admit you have it, we can build from there. That is the gospel. The gospel is, why did Jesus come? Why did he die? His death, burial, and resurrection. And what is immortality? And so you're kind of doing a both and. You're intentionally seeking out men that will make you better right now, while pouring into others and saying, you have so much potential ahead of you.
Yeah. Let me speak. Lord's kind of laying this on my heart right now. We've got listeners right now that are like, how do I do that? I don't even know where to look for solid dudes. These Christians are a bunch of hypocrites and whatever. Yes, we are. And there's churches full of us all over the place. But there are men in those churches that are amazing, and God wants to use those men in your life. And people listening right now, there's people saying, how do I do that? What does that look like? For me, this is not me changing. I didn't change anything to say, now, how can a dude sit there and say he doesn't have any issues with pornography? He doesn't have any issues with alcohol. It's not me. I didn't do any one particular thing, but the path that was started on that was me saying, Lord, give me that insatiable appetite for your word. And it just started with me driving to work and hitting play on the Bible app and just listening to it. And you go cover to cover, and then you're done. And you hit play again, and you just keep pressing play. And with that, when I said, Lord, you're my focus, you are my focus, and however long it wants to take, I'll just do life with you until you start to allow these opportunities for these men to filter into my life. And he will quick. He'll point you in the direction of one guy immediately. And you get that one guy, and then you can go to him and say, hey, I'm listening to this. What does this mean? And you can take your questions to that guy, and you'll know he's a solid dude if he says, I don't have the answer. Let's find it together. Or the Lord uses that to route another man into your life or another woman into your life. And now there's three of you. And now you just keep on doing your part, pressing play or flipping the page. And don't let anything come in between you and the Lord's word, because that's where God's really been able to use me in other people's lives. So I give that focus to, I'm going to do this every day, no matter what. And people are like, you read the same book over and over and over. Yes, I do.
Listen, those men are out there, and men who are hungry for that iron sharpens iron type of relationship, you can find them. Some of you guys are in churches right now where you may not have that, but you can find them if you look for them. And I'm not saying leave your church. I'm saying those relationships are available, but you got to relentlessly pursue them. And they have to be better for your marriage and your parenting. You get connected to a guy who's a manly man who can gut a deer, change the oil on his car, but he's, talking vulgar and immoral stuff. Run. That ain't good at all.
Here's another thing. You got listeners right now that are saying, well, I don't have any guys like that. I don't have anywhere to begin. Take ownership and you do it. You develop that walk in your life with Christ, and then allow him to let you pastor other dudes.
Yeah,
there's no excuse. Just go after it, man.
You can't find one, be one. You start and that's what we tell them. You at some point you'll stop becoming and you'll just be. And so when you be, you will start to attract those people. And Not everybody likes that. Not everybody likes, the Paul kind of guy who is going to tell you the truth. And it's grace and truth. It's a balance. But man, you want guys who, will check in on you. You want guys who will hold your feet to the fire. You want guys who will say, I need you to do the same for me. And when you give them that permission, then listen to their counsel, and that will go a long way. And it sounds like you're building that community where you're at right now, your local church.
Yeah, we've got some solid guys. I wish we had more guys like Nick, for sure. You get around those guys and you're like, oh, why can't we have 20 or 30 or 50 of these dudes? Sometimes it's only 2 or 3, but hey, that's better than nothing.
Well, one thing I want to go back to, because I think this is important, because for guys, sometimes, whether it's steps, whether it's discipleship, whatever it is, there's a vulnerability of putting yourself out there. A lot of men don't have really good relationships. So just to rewind your Nick's interaction, here you are, you took the first step of going, a note on my phone, do you want to connect? He could have gave you a thumbs down. He could have blew you off. It could have been awkward, but you put yourself out there, and then when you go, hey, let's connect, let's meet up. You said there was an extended period of time before you connected. It would be easy to get your feelings hurt and go, well, this guy's blowing me off. Well, he thinks he's, whatever. We all have tough schedules, so you didn't do that. But because that you put yourself out there, because you didn't get your feelings hurt, because Ted, that you have something to offer as well. That's where we get better, that you bring something to the table, and we say either add value, take it away. And you knew, like, hey, if this guy doesn't want to have lunch or coffee or whatever, I'll be okay. I'm a grown man. But man, I think that's so important, that men are willing to put themselves out there, get out of their comfort zone and say, I'm looking for some good dudes. Are you one of them? Maybe not.
Yeah, sometimes I wish that instead of doing the meet and greet during the church service, you just exchange numbers. I mean, that might not be that might work out really well for some people, and that's me being good idea fairing. Like, oh, hey, my pastor listened to this guy and we did it, and now I've got, that could backfire on a lot of people too.
Your singles ministry would take off if you started doing that. That's not numbers.
You're right.
No, that's a good idea, because at some point it's easy to blame my kids. Right? Like, I got 3 kids. We got soccer and homework. It's easy to blame my wife. Well, I got to get home. I've been out, but at the end of your life, you got to decide, what do I really want in life? And I will say this, and I think you could attest to this, when you surround yourself with high quality individuals, the collective character of these men will make you a better husband and father. When you surround yourself with those people, your wife and children will be for it. They're good with it. If you need to take off tonight and go meet with one of these guys in your group, she's like, yeah, because I know you're going to come home better. I know you're not going to come home gambling our rent money away, or, drinking all of our car payment or whatever, like, there is integrity there. You're living above reproach, and you got to decide, what do you want in life?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Jamie has no qualms with me saying, hey, I'm going to go out with Larry. Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to go out with Richard. Have at it.
Yeah.
She lets me go all the time.
And how many guys are trying to manipulate their wife to get to go out and do something? Like, I did a bunch of dishes and fold the laundry because I'm about to ask her for, I'm like, that's not a marriage. That's manipulation. I don't want to live like that. But so, hey, what would you say to the guy? Let's go back. The guy that realized, man, I got some stuff in my life. I got some, you mentioned resentment, but I got alcohol, I got pornography, I got some form of, what do you tell them? Yeah. What's the first?
Coveting or gluttony. I have to ask questions. I've got to, not so much what do I tell them on that, it's me digging in and asking them questions. What does this look like in your life? Where is your time going to? Where is your focus on this? How is your job affecting you here? What's your relationship with your wife like? And with simple questions like that and the answers that they give, then I can meet a guy where he's at and start to pour into his life. At that point, the Lord will, and I'm praying for him. While he's giving me answers, I pray, Lord, show me where do I need to speak to this guy? Because I think I need to go here, but you ultimately know that the direction this conversation needs to go this way. And sometimes the Lord will immediately put a spotlight on, oh, it's right here, dude. We have to address this first. And other times it takes longer dialogue to get to the heart of the matter on, hey, here's where here's where I think you should focus. Always, though, always pointing them back to Christ and always pointing them into the Word. And so if I can give them a passage of Scripture, not just one verse, throw a verse at them and hope it sticks. Give them a whole chapter. Give them the whole, hey, I think Joseph went through a point in his life, or Daniel went through a point in his life that kind of can relate to what you're going through. Hey, let's go read Daniel chapter 2 and 3 together. And approaching it like that, so much more gets done than me trying to play psychiatrist and be like, oh, you're doing this. You know, it doesn't work out like that. You point them to Jesus, Jesus will fix them.
Amen. But that's why getting around other guys, they'll go, yeah, me too. We're in this together. Let's fight this battle. Let's, yeah. And you're doing that. And man, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being transparent with that. I think anytime we can put some tools in a toolbox of a guy to say, how do I moved to a new town. I'm into, finding a church is tough. You talked about you were at your fourth church. Finding a church is tough. It's almost like buying a house. You're making a big commitment if you take church seriously. And the fact that, God put Matt at that door and that you've reached out, God's doing something through those conversations and through that camaraderie. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Two things I want to speak into that while you're on the topic. Number one, if you're in that season of your life where you're looking for a new church, or you're a guy that's listening, like, where do I go? Where do I go find these guys? Walk into that church and look for solid biblical doctrine. And if they're not teaching solid biblical doctrine, walk back out. That'd be one for finding the right type of dudes. Because that's the first red flag you look for. That is not what the Bible says. I'm out of here. And then two, on the topic of tools and equipping other guys. Right now in this COVID-19 season that we're in, we can't go to church and we're stuck in the house. And one thing that I was doing prior to this COVID thing that has worked out absolutely tremendously for me, and I'm spreading it to everybody I can, is you have those days as a dad and as a leader of the house where you're like, I just don't feel like going to church today. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's an attack. Maybe you do know it's an attack. Maybe you had a fight with your wife or a fight with your kids trying to get them ready. You're going to be late. You just don't want to go. Whatever the reason is, I've had those days too. And on those days, I've said, you know what? We're not going to church, but we're all getting in the car and I'm picking a sermon off of whatever pastor it is that I listen to and being intentional about what we listen to. And I go out in the country and I've told my kids, no fidgeting around, no poking each other, no nothing. If you can stay still, just look out the window and listen. We'll stop at the halfway point. We'll hop out. We'll grab a snack. And then we'll listen to the other half of the sermon on the way back. And so I think 2 Sundays ago, I was listening to God wanting to shape your identity and Satan wanted to take that identity and turn it into something else. And I was like, that's a great message right there. Let's listen to that and hit play. It gets everybody out of the house because everybody wants to get out of the house. You don't come in contact with anybody else because you're in your own little van. And you work at church service, and it doesn't just have to be Sundays. So that's one of the tools that I've been using for, hey, let's go. We're just going to listen to this sermon, and out the door we go.
Ted, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm sure we are going to have certainly another conversation with you. There's a lot to just keep chewing on. And once again, I thank you for having this with us. Yeah. I think you gave us a lot to think about. And I wasn't even necessarily anticipating this, but just men getting out of their comfort zone to seek out other good men who can help them become better equipped and help them grow. So thank you, brother, for doing it. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been an honor. It's been a great opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Once again, men, thank you for listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. If you go to thepursuitofmanliness.com, there you can find all the previous podcast episodes as well as links to our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also find a link to our closed Facebook group. It's facebook.com/groups/Pursuit of Manliness. And I also want to remind you once again, registration for the next session of Tribe ends May 25th, 2020. Go to thepursuitofmanliness.com/tribe. Men, let's keep pursuing biblical manliness.